Hey, welcome back, everybody. Welcome to Metatrends with Mark and Mike. We have with us Bill Bishop, who's a marketing guru out of Toronto. I've done some interesting work with him, and I've been exposed to his clients in the past, so I know he knows what he's talking about. So, Bill, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I'm curious. So the audience understands what's your background, what got you to where you are, that type of thing. Can you fill us in? Like, where'd you come from originally, and what led you to where you are now?
All right. That's a great question. So my company's called the Big Idea Company. So I've been in business now for almost 40 years. And I've been an entrepreneur all my life. Like when I was a kid, I came from, I would just say a privileged background, but my parents said, we're not giving any allowance because they didn't want me to get spoiled. So my first job was like 7 years old selling newspapers on the corner in a blizzard. So that's where I started. And I made a penny a paper. So anyway, I wasn't happy with my parents not giving me allowance, but in the long run, I've seen that was a good advice. So anyway, I had hundreds of jobs. And when I was in university, I worked at a steak restaurant. I was a waiter. And I won this contest selling lobsters at the steak restaurant. And I sold 1,400 lobsters. And the second guy sold 90 lobsters. And so I got kind of famous in this steak restaurant chain that I had done that. And that was my first big idea. It was like a different way of selling as a waiter, right? I sold all these lobsters. I wrote a book called years later called How to Sell Lobster. That's my most popular book. I sold over 1 million copies of that book, and it's been translated into 12 languages. And everybody that reads it, I get emails all the time with people saying, that was an amazing idea. I never would have thought of that, but it makes total sense how you did that. So anyway, so that from that experience, people started coming to me and saying, I got this thing to sell. I'm trying to sell hats, or I'm trying to sell life insurance or something. What's my big idea for that? And we would start coming up with those. And so that's how I fell into this business, actually. And since then, we've worked with about 5,000 companies and entrepreneurs, and every one of them we've come up with big ideas for, and to help them sell more stuff. Basically, that's the general origin of what I do.
All right, so I'm going to brag on you to Mike, and the audience here.
Yeah.
One of his clients wrote a book called "Smart Women Finish Rich," and I bought the rights to it to do seminars on Long Island from that guy, David something or other.
David Bach.
Yeah, David Bach.
Smart Couples Finish Rich. That was his first one. Yeah.
Yeah. So the deal is, he was like a runaway success for the financial advisors.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was actually on Oprah and was part of Oprah's book club.
Yeah, and he talked about the latte factor. That was his big idea, right? So that's an example right there of a big idea, actually. The latte factor. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. We've had some amazing clients over the years, for sure.
And Bill came to see me speak in Toronto, Mike, and his suggestion to me was I should offer a free copy of my book if they don't let life get in the way, and hand in a sheet at the end of my presentation to say, hey, I want to talk to Mark about X, Y, or Z. And it increased the hand-ins by about 40%.
Just like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sometimes it's these very simple things, Yeah.
Well, Mark sometimes tells me, Mike, I know that your background is in communications. I understand that it's crisis communications work, government work, public policy, etc. But don't always talk to the guests about communications. And today I'm ignoring Mark because that's what I do for a living.
Cool.
My public service. So I'm about to order your book as you're speaking. Just continue going with the conversation.
Well, the interesting part is that, how did I sell the lobsters, right? And it was about communications. Because what I did was I said to the customers, I said, well, you have a choice here. You can order the basic steak, or you can have the special. And they, what's the special? I said, well, it's a steak and lobster. And I remember the first table was an office party of 20 people. And I could see them all thinking about it for a second. They said, well, I'll have the special. So I just sold 20 lobsters. And then I just kept doing that. And then I started thinking, well, why is that working? And this is the key thing. Yes. And I realized, okay, it wasn't about the lobster ever, because just trying to sell it straight, they weren't buying it. But it put that way, communicated that way, They was like, well, it's about them now. Like if they order the basic steak, then they're a basic person. They don't want to be a basic person. They want to be a special person. So I started realizing like marketing communicates all about the people. It's not about you, not about your product, it's how they feel buying it. Right. And then the second thing was, well, what about that office party? Are we going to have a basic, boring office party and everybody hates working at the company? Or we're going to have a special office party and everybody loves the company. We all want to work there. So it added value to the office party, right? And then I realized the key was that people don't buy products and services, they buy ideas. And so we're often trying so hard to pitch people on the features of our product, or we're trying to make our product better. But it's actually the idea that we need to upgrade, right? So I had upgraded the idea of that lobster by doing it this way. So that became really the underlying principle that I work from is, we always typically have great products, great services, but the idea that we're selling that's attached to it, it sucks. It's not a good idea. It's boring, right? It's boring. It's commoditized. You look like a salesperson. So if you can package it up in a way that gets a bigger, better idea in their mind, then suddenly they buy it. That's why the best product doesn't always sell the best. It's the best idea that sells.
And I think
And do you find that that's true in every industry that you consult in, from manufacturers to restaurants to industrial users, whatever it may be? You find that
doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter what it is. That's why it's such a universal thing. It is because everybody's got something they're selling, but we're all selling an idea. And oftentimes we're deluded because we love our product. They talk about love your product. That can actually be a mistake because you're so in love with it that you realize, well, the rest of the world doesn't care, right? They don't care about you. So you just assume it'll sell itself. But no, you have to start thinking about that value is actually created in their mind, right? So how do I create value in their mind? That's the other insight. The value is actually, really created out of thin air, really, you say most of the time. And words and ideas can do that, So
and before Mark cuts me off, one more question just before he keeps going. Do you find, because I found this, I haven't spoken to Vistage groups as many as you have, of course not, but do you find that there is initial resistance to, maybe it's against their corporate culture, to have those types of big idea marketing departments, if you want to call it, or folks that are assigned to those tasks? Because some would say that a lot of companies say, yeah, sure, we'll send out a press release, as opposed to, well, no, this is how we're selling, this is how we're packaging it to the general public or to the public that we are targeting. Do you find there's initial resistance, or do you think companies are big or small? Yeah, that's a good idea.
Well, that mentioned back to press release, because that where I got into was into public relations. I worked at Ogilvy and Mather and their PR. Started my company. I worked at Ogilvy and Mather's PR division, and that was the client problem with the clients, was they were saying, "Here, we got this amazing thing. Let's send out a press release." I go, "No, it's boring. Nobody's going to be interested in that." I said we need to jazz it up a bit with something more interesting. So that once again was a big idea. Before, the media are not going to be interested in this, but if you say it this way and present it this way, they will be, right? So there was always, it wasn't so much resistance. It was more about just not knowing, right? Just not knowing that you need to take it to another level of idea here, and it'll work way better. That's all there is to it.
It comes back to the power of questions, So there's a great book on the subject by Susan Scott called Fierce Conversations. And what she recommends is that the leaders get really comfortable with being uncomfortable. So now she's using it for accountability and things like that, but she would ask really tough questions, and then sit in silence. Let silence do the heavy lifting and see what happens. That's what I think you were doing with the lobsters. Yeah, there's an angle on here that I'm not so sure where the answer to this question would go. But there's a concept in evolutionary theory that people do not make decisions utilizing their conscious brain. They make them using their ancient brain, or what's called the limbic system. That limbic system doesn't speak. So it predates our ability to speak. So when you're hearing words in your head, that's your neocortex doing it. When you're feeling emotions, it's your limbic system. And then what one psychologist argues is that people make a decision silently because that's the brain, that's a part of the brain that doesn't speak. And then the part of the brain that speaks is really just the press secretary, like making the ancient brain right.
Yeah, well, rationalizing it.
So I'm curious. I don't know that you're the right person to ask this question, but I'm curious about how when we're making our decisions, it has to be about us, and it has to be satisfying something for us. So I think, if I'm right, that the sales process goes wrong when the deciding factor hasn't come up in the conversation. Like it's the things that are unsaid as opposed to the things that are said.
Well, it partly what you're talking about emotional value here.
Yeah.
So that's the thing about the idea that if the idea you get makes you feel good, and and it's maybe so deep down that you don't even know it, but or it makes you feel, it's like, let's start with, it makes you feel bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
And some gut level, you're just not going to buy it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But if it makes you feel good on some gut level, you're going to buy it. Right. So this is why the idea is so important. So if you, for example, just go out and present your product and you look like a salesperson, that's going to make them feel bad. Right. They're going to, a salesperson trying to sell me something. So we're not going through some giant algorithm in our brain. It just makes us feel bad. So we go, I have aversion to that. So I'm just going to say no. Right. So how do we make people feel good? Right. Well, marketing is also about becoming. Okay. It's like helping people frame a self-image. So what you were doing is you're giving them an idea of something new to become. This is the key. So when I did this with simple thing with the lobster, it was like, I'm giving you a choice now of who you can become. You can become a loser and you order the basic, or you can become a winner and a special person and order the special. Who do you want to become? Right.
Yeah.
I want to become that. And that thought of that makes you feel good. Right.
Like, so it's some of my experience around sales of businesses that go wrong. It's partially because no one asked the person, what do they want to be when they grow up? Regardless of age. Right. This one in Raleigh, I don't know if I've ever told this story on the podcast. One in Raleigh, I called the guy up because the chair asked me to coach his member. Now, in 27,000 members that I've either presented to or surveyed or what have you in the last 10 years, one chair asked me to coach his member, which means he wants me to fix the member. Something's wrong, right? And he's beyond his experience in coaching, right? So I said, all right. And he was doing nice things for me on ChairNet. So I said, okay. So I call up the member, and the member goes, he's got this laundry list of hatred for the private equity company that bought him out. And then fired him from his own board. And I'm like, now of the 27,000 CEOs, that's the first time I ever heard that too. So I'm like, I said, fired from your own board. There's a story behind that. Tell me more. He tells me a story. And I said, okay, I'm going to tell you what I heard. You tell me if this sounds reasonable. Someone wrote you a check for $36 million and you hate them for it. Now he didn't laugh, which is usually a sign when a therapist knows someone's getting healthy. The deal is he said, yeah, that's perfectly reasonable. And I was like, that's like saying I hate the lottery because I won the lottery. You see how crazy that sounds? So, what it was is nobody asked him, what do you want to be when you grow up? Because it would have been the leader of this company, and therefore he should not have sold.
Right. So that's what he really wanted. He didn't want the money. He wanted to be the leader.
Yep. And maybe it was part of his identity or whatever. We don't need to psychoanalyze the guy. It's just, I think that question, like, what do you want to be when you grow up, is so important for the process, because really when you're trying to sell somebody something, it's a form of negotiation. How do we make it as much about them as possible?
Yeah. Well, this is why, like, another thing that I teach my clients and help them do is to really see that you're really in a transformation business. Okay. So you're taking people, just to use a standard analogy. Your customer, whatever, is a caterpillar, and you want to show them what it looks like to be a butterfly, right? And that's actually what your business is. And to kind of see it that way, as opposed to, oh, here's just the thing I'm going to give you, right? And, like, there's no idea in that. But when you give them the idea of something new to become, then they get excited. But there's a classic case of, in Canada anyway, I don't know if in the States they would know this, but there's this life insurance company. In those days, it was called London Life. and they had this advertising campaign, and it was called Freedom 55. Okay. And there were these commercials which shows people, 55 relatively young people, retired and on the beach and everything. And it was like, you could retire at 55. You don't have to wait till 65. Okay. And that took off like wildfire. Like, it was before memes, it was a meme. Okay. Like, everybody was talking about, yeah, Freedom 55. It still is. Like, people like Freedom 55, right? They even changed the name of the company to that, but it helped them sell a heck of a lot of life insurance, because people say, how do I get to try at 55? Well, you come and see us and we'll talk to you. And one of it is to buy whole life insurance, and it'll help you save for retirement. And that was the whole point, and that was a brilliant idea. And it's perennial because it still works. Like I say, they even call the company that now, right? So it was this idea. Well, you could become a retired person at 55, something new to become, as opposed to a 70-year-old retired or something, 55. So, so that's kind of the core ingredients of a big idea. Sorry, I missed that part, Mark.
It's a better slogan than Forever 21.
Well, yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. Now the other thing that I get into nowadays is helping people build their business for the future. I call it new factory thinking. This is taking it a long way from the lobsters, and that's really what I talk about in my talks. And it really is about helping people build the business of the future. And this is something that most companies don't do. I just saw a study from the Wharton School of Business that said 92% of companies, their business plan for next year is the same as this year.
Yeah, that's
like, okay. Like, it's just like, well, let's just make a photocopy of last year's business plan and do it. And then they said, of course, those are the companies that get disrupted, and because things keep changing. Because you see, the thing is, yeah, not only is it the business plan from today that we're going to do next year, it's the same business plan we had 10 years ago. Okay. We just kept doing that. And they said the 8% that have something planned for the future that's different are the ones that grow. And they're ones that, they said like 30% more growth because of they use that attitude. Right. So that's what we've gotten into, saying, now, what's the big idea for your future? And what's new value you're going to create in the world? That's the thing that I've really been teaching people. And then that, based on a new way of thinking, we call new factory thinking. That's my whole business these days, is doing that in our coaching program that we have, is helping people create their new factory. Yeah. So
great.
Yeah.
I guess maybe we should talk more about that then, because we're now at the stage where we're going to be moving over to the other platform, which is the middle market platform. That's where the Vistage members will concentrate in. So it's more like, okay, we've gone beyond the entrepreneur stage. Now we're actually grown. Because what comes to mind is we had a gentleman on the podcast a little while back that handles M&A work.